a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and the Geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stag Brewing. Delicious beer now in a liquor store near you. I am John Bonus of Twins Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman, and I mean really with me, like next to me in a Radio 3 booth,
sitting at his lap.
trading, Aaron Gleeman.
We are live
The Athletic
from Fort Myers. Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
And in about, 3 hours, less than 3 hours, the Twins will play their first game of spring training against the mighty Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Yeah.
We'll see how that goes.
I think I've seen a couple of Golden Gopher games versus the Golden Gophers. It doesn't happen every year, but it happens most often. And I think the last time I did it, and I'm scarred by this because I kind of keep expecting the temperature to start dropping and for this to be a miserable experience to watch. Because the last time we did it, it was so cold. Were you here for that one where it was like the temperature during the day dropped, I don't know, 35 degrees, and Betsy was maybe like four layers, and she
complained an hour ago that she's cold. It's 87 degrees here. I'm not kidding. I've sweated like 50 pounds up. She's like, it's a little cold.
It was so cold the last time I remember the Twins playing the Gophers, but it's much nicer now. 80 degrees. I will say it again. I repeat it every year. I'll repeat it every episode. If you're a baseball fan and you don't come down for a spring training at least once in your life, you're doing it wrong. You've got to get down here and leave Minnesota, and it's, how many, 6 inches of snow they got this week, and, 14-degree weather or whatever, and come down here for baseball and 75 degrees. You just have to find a way to do it. So
now, unfortunately, I agree with all that, but unfortunately, the first week of Twins camp leading up to tonight being the first game, it's hard to imagine more of a buzzkill. Obviously, there was a lot of frustration for several elements of the Twins, ownership, roster-wise, everything last season. There was a sense, I think, on day one of camp, like full squad workouts, which was Monday. Derek Shelton, first-year manager, he gives his, kind of welcome to camp speech in the closed clubhouse, and Tom Pohlad, I'm going to guess the first time a Pohlad has done this, at least in a decade plus.
Yeah, probably.
He also gave a speech of kind of...
You think Carl... I think Carl did that in 1980. 1986 when
and
he
here's
took over.
The funny thing. So that happened Monday morning.
Yes.
Which was my first day of camp, too. And we talked to players and coaches and other people around that were like, you know what? It was actually sort of inspiring.
A lot of excitement. Yeah, right.
It hit a lot of good notes, I think, to a lot of people. And then they go out onto the field for the first day of full squad workouts, which one of the big draw is live batting practice, which all that means is pitchers throwing to hitters.
In front of a stadium, half full of people. Like
right. It was the open house day.
That's right.
Here at Hammond Stadium.
That's right.
And 3 innings into it, an hour plus, let's say, into it, Pablo López walks off the mound with what we learned today, about an hour or so ago. He got a second opinion. It is a partially but significantly torn ulnar collateral ligament, UCL, which unfortunately is the Tommy John surgery injury. And they just confirmed earlier today that he is going to have Tommy John surgery Wednesday in Texas. Dr. Keith Meister, who's become sort of the new Jim Andrews as the go-to guy. Right. I think Jim Andrews is retired at this point. But so Pablo's going to have surgery Wednesday, and he will miss the whole season. We're going to talk more about that and also what it means for the rotation. I should note we did like a whole hour show, like a half hour after the news earlier in this week, kind of breaking it down. And I'm not going to rehash the kind of emotional element because, Pablo the person and also Johan was here and all that stuff. And it was like, he's going to skip
it was just so
WBC for Venezuela and all
That's
that.
Right.
Listen to the Patreon if you want that. But we're going to talk more about kind of the nuts and bolts domino effect with the rotation. But the only real, I don't even say positive, non-negative for this, you've lost, I would say, their second, maybe their third best player for the entire season before really camp even gets rolling.
Right.
It's tough to draw it up any worse than that, really.
Yes.
And also from a leadership component, all that, you've lost him. I will say that having the surgery on, February 25th instead of even May 25th does bring with it a lot more realistic hope that he can have a somewhat full 2027 season. Right. Now, he still needs
especially if the 2020 season isn't full.
True, right. If it's delayed by a lockout and all that.
That's right.
But I mean, you know, Tommy John surgery is not a sure thing at this point, but it has become much more of much closer to a sure thing than it was 10 or 20 years ago. Yes. And we actually talked to Pablo, you know, an hour and a half ago about this, and what he said was this is his second one.
Right.
You know, he got this when he was a teenager in the Mariners farm system, and it lasted him 12 years, which is, you know, pretty damn good return on investment.
And he talked a little bit, or was asked straight up about like the fact that it's your second one. That would have been a lot scarier a decade ago than it is right now. And his point was, I mean, the numbers, the upper 90s percentages of success on this kind of tell the story. And he's going to, he's already been through the process once. He knows how it works. If anything, the fact that the surgery has improved and they've got a new technique involving this brace that kind of goes around the ligament is also, you know, makes the recovery time a little bit easier, makes the recovery
we'll see if he does. That's a different version.
A little bit faster. I'm sorry.
We'll see if he takes that version. But he probably will.
It sounded like he did. He was talking about it today.
So. And I mean, we're at the stage now where there are guys in the majors who have had 3 Tommy John surgeries. Right. And so 2 is not the novelty that it once was. I mean, there's still an incredible amount of hard work. I have no doubt he'll put that in. There's also just a bit of luck.
Yeah.
The body, you know, there's no sure things in terms of how the body will react. So it's tough to, you know, basically sit down at camp and have that happen and then be like, okay, now what do we make of this? Because a lot of the usual elements of spring training, of just sort of clean slate and wait till next year. Well, now this is next year. This kind of knocks a lot of that off the table because it's like it was already difficult enough, at least from my viewpoint. You might be slightly more optimistic, but I certainly wouldn't call you optimistic by John Bonus terms, at least for the 2026 Twins.
Fair.
I mean, this takes that and just kind of, you know, takes the air out of it. And we can get into just like what are they losing in Lopez in terms of just a wins and losses thing.
Yeah.
And there's all the other stuff that you can get into. But then what does it mean for rotation that even if Lopez had been healthy, look to have 2 spots at least nominally up for grabs? You know, you had Lopez, Joe Ryan, and Bailey Ober. And then, you know, I think probably Simeon Woods-Richardson and probably Taj Bradley. There's been some indications. Not only does he have the most experience, he's got like 300 innings in the majors, but I think they want to give him a real runway. Well, now if those two guys are in the rotation, now you have yet another spot for a David Festa or a Zebby Matthews or a Mick Abel or even someone like, I don't know, Andrew Morris to step forward. Like this is a situation and we got
or
into
at some point during your Kendry Rojas or right.
But and then beyond that, and we got into this pretty heavily on the Patreon side too, patreon.com/Gleeman. Sign up, you get it. We should note we got a deal running. You can join us for a month.
Yeah.
Listen to the shows, which are at least 2 exclusive Patreon shows per week, Mondays and Wednesdays usually, in addition to the one you're listening to now, 50% off.
And including the back catalog. If you want to hear our immediate reaction to sitting down with Tom Pohlad for, 15, 20 minutes and get our immediate reaction to that, and our immediate reaction to talking to Jeremy Zoll and Pablo Lopez about the injuries for 15 minutes, like much deeper dives on that. And in fact, we think we've arranged a special, I
believe we have a very exciting guest lined up for middle of next week on the Patreon side. So get 50% off.
And it's $1 a week. So for through spring training.
But one of the things we talked about a little more in depth there was, you know, they could pivot here and try to fill that, you know, one of the first 3 rotation spots that's now open by Lopez's injury with a free agent. Yeah. Because the one thing that is still available in free agency, there's a handful of kind of mid-rotation veteran starters. You know, Lucas Giolito is probably the best one. Max Scherzer is the biggest name, but, you know, he's 41, and I don't know how keen he would be on maybe ending his career for a non-competitive team in Minnesota.
He's waiting for
but you even have guys like old friend Zach Littell, who's turned himself into a decent starter. There is an opportunity to replace Lopez with another veteran. Now, this person is not going to be as good, but I mean, from a payroll standpoint, they're barely over $100 million now. And one of the things we talked to Tom Pohlad about the other day that we broke down on the Patreon was, you know, he confirmed that they did try to make a run at Framber Valdez. Now, I'm highly skeptical, as I'm sure many people listening to this are, what that meant. Like how in the mix were they really? Right. Was it a cursory but either way, but
there's no way you're even entering the bidding for less than $20 million a year.
Sure.
Right.
And so then you can figure from that, do you have $12 million for Lucas Giolito? Well, yeah, I mean, they obviously do. I don't know, though, that I think if this were as odd as this sounds, stay with me on this. If this were a better team, like if it were projected for 83 wins right now instead of 78 wins right now, I think it would make more sense to try to bring in a Littell or a Giolito to just 1-for-1 sub for Lopez because the floor kind of helps.
Right.
But because this is a team that is not projected to be good and will kind of need, I think, probably some breakout performances to overperform those expectations, I almost wonder, not from a monetary Lord knows I'm all for the Pohlad spending money, but it might be time to just use this as sort of a kick in the butt to find out what you have in Festa and Abel and Matthews and the other guys we talked about. Because as much as we refer to those guys, and there's a handful of them, Woods Richardson, Bradley, etc., as young starters, they're not that young and they're really not that inexperienced at this point. I mean, almost all of them have pitched in the majors. Bradley's pitched 3 seasons in the majors. Festa and Matthews have each pitched parts of 2 seasons in the majors. I think, if not now, when? And you also just need to find out, for this season, they likely have more pure upside than a Giolito or Littell. Sure. They also have significantly more downside, obviously. But I'm not that worried about the downside because I don't think this team as is likely to be very good anyway. And so all you need is upside.
So you're playing the upside.
Right.
I don't disagree with that. The one thing I will say about that is, as we went into this, we basically had 4 of the 5 starting spots taken. We had Lopez, Ryan, Ober, and I think Simeon Woods Richardson is, inked into the 4th spot. But I could be wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure he's earned that.
That's how I would approach it. I don't know that the Twins necessarily.
And that left 4 guys battling for 1 spot. Well, now we've got 4 guys battling for 2 spots. Right. And what that means is that, at the end of the year, those 4 guys are going to each have had a year. One of them was the best, one was the second best, one was the third best, and one was the worst, right? And now, before, if the question was, do we want to bring in Lucas Giolito? The question is he going to be better than the best of those 4? Right. And now the question is he going to be better than the second best of those 4?
Yeah.
Right? And
the 4 being Bradley, Abel, Festa, Matthews.
Correct. Okay. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes, that's right. And, and really, given the fact that injuries continue to happen, and we've got enough questions in there, we're kind of getting out. It's more likely that the question is going to be like, is he going to be better than the third best of those 4, right? And at that point, I'm kind of like, well, probably. But I agree with you because I think this year depends in part because you have a team that I think is more of a mid-70s win team, right? I think you need to play some upside. I think there's a lot of places for upside on this roster. I think the story of this season is going to be how the 8 players that are kind of in my head as guys who have sort of been here for for a year or 2 or maybe even 3 and have somewhat stalled out or regressed, whether or not how many of those 8 take the big step that
kind of prime age 25 to 28-year-old.
Yes, and the time when you take a big step, they're all at that age where they either take a big step or, in many of their cases, they could be in trouble.
Yes.
Like we have a trouble, right? We've got 4 from the offensive side and 4 from the pitching side. Right. The 4 from the offensive side are Royce Lewis, Matt Wallner, Trevor Larnach, Brooks Lee. Tell me what you think. And then the 4 from the pitching side are the 3 guys. I wouldn't put Make Abel in that group. He hasn't been around. He's only been. Sure. He's just been introduced.
But Zebby,
Festa, Taj Bradley, and then I would add the reliever side, Cole Sands.
Okay,
right.
I can see that.
If we get 5 of those guys took big steps forward, or 7 of the 8 took at least a step forward, and 3 of them took a big step forward. Well, then this might be a competitive team. If we get 8 stalled outs, or a couple guys sink down, etc., which is what we've seen from almost all of them,
then a lot of them aren't even going to be in the 2027 plan.
Then it doesn't really matter. And Lucas Giolito isn't going to be the difference between this being a competitive team and not being a competitive team.
Now, with that said, if we hear tomorrow that they signed Zach Littell for an $8 million deal, or
Giolito, I understand it. Right?
It's not like I'm against it. I mean, you can truly never, as we're seeing already, you can never have too much starting pitching depth.
Yeah, and that's where the third best starter thing makes some sense.
But I don't think a mediocre kind of 160 innings of a 4-something ERA, while that does have value in a lot of circumstances. And it would be better than the worst case with what we've seen, let's say, from Matthews the past 2 seasons, which is like a 6 ERA.
Right.
The kind of middle ground doesn't help a team like this. They need to either hit or miss, and it's not. I mean, we can get into who individually we think is more likely to hit than miss and all that, but I do kind of agree with you overall. It's like, and if I'm being honest, like, I don't think it's impossible that this season can be a competitive season. I think the AL Central typically creates a situation where 80-something wins, even low 80-something wins, can keep you in the mix, and I think that would be a relative success for the Twins.
Right.
So I'm not trying to punt on that. And if someone listening to this is like, well, Lucas Giolito gives them a much better chance of that than some of the younger arms we mentioned, okay, fine. I'm willing to, but I almost view it as, how can we kind of approach 2026 that also has an effect on 2027?
Yeah, I mean, that's the...
And giving those guys the chance, the runway to do it or don't.
I think the way we talked a little bit on the Patreon was like, you want to say, listen, I can squeeze a little bit more value out of Zach Littell than I can the second best of those guys. Let's see, Zebby Matthews, right? Can I squeeze a little bit more out of this year, and does that matter? Okay, I understand. I'll buy that. Like, I feel like maybe you can potentially squeeze a little more value out of that. But does that little bit of value make up for the fact that I don't know what I've got for 2027 right now?
Right.
Because the other thing to keep in mind here is that they do not compete this year, and 2026 trade deadline comes around.
Mm-hmm.
Now they've got 2 starting pitchers.
They don't have Lopez anymore.
We'll talk
that's
about
an unfortunate domino.
Yes, that's right. But both Joe Ryan and Bailey Ober have good years. They could both be traded, and now suddenly you've got next year's rotation looks like a Pablo Lopez coming back from Tommy John surgery, maybe a Simeon Woods Richardson as your number 2, and then who of these other 4 guys are numbers 3, 4, and 5? Before you actually get free agency and trades. And
I would put
else,
it more like you need to find out who your 2027 number 2 starter is and number 3 starter is, because it's all due respect to Simeon Woods Richardson, who has actually outperformed all these guys that we've mentioned.
Sure.
But I think at least I perceive him as having less upside. So I don't know. It's kind of like we talked about after the trade deadline, where the playing time itself for a bad team or a rebuilt team or a roster that's been torn apart has developmental value. It has value from just reps, but it also has value from, if Lopez is healthy, does, whoever's near the bottom of that young starter list, does, David Festa or Mick Abel, do they spend 3 months at AAA, or are they moved to the bullpen just to get them some work in the majors? And does that give them less of a clean shot at proving they can be a number 2 starter, a number 3 starter? Now,
and that's not my focus. My focus is, hey, we need to develop them for 2027.
Right.
But there is a benefit to that I think is not something you want to ignore.
The other thing that about camp, and we can talk more about roster stuff too, but it did strike me like the difference in just walking around here and where you used to have Joe Pohlad, Derek Falvey, and Rocco Baldelli in the 3 positions of power here.
Yeah, leadership, yeah.
Now that has been completely shifted and cleared out, and you have Tom Pohlad, Jeremy Zoll, and Derek Shelton. I do feel for Derek Shelton at this point of like, how do you build momentum off this? Of like, okay, day 1. It's like, well, we can lean on our starting pitchers. That has been a talking point for months, and it wasn't untrue. I don't know that it's even true anymore. I mean, we talked about this on the Patreon side. I looked, prior to the Lopez injury, Fangraphs projected the Twins as having the 11th best starting rotation in baseball, whereas they projected both the bullpen and the lineup in the 20s somewhere. Being the 11th best rotation in baseball is pretty good. And there are plenty of playoff teams that would be in that range.
And you've got a chance for some upside on that too, right?
But I don't know that there are a lot of playoff teams who are, the 22nd bullpen and the 24th lineup and quote-unquote only 11th in rotation. I don't know that 11th is really capable of carrying. Well, now, post-Lopez injury, they've dropped, I think, to 14th, maybe 15th, which means you're just average as a rotation.
And by the way, that sounds right.
That kind of tracks with just what we know about Ober and Ryan.
Like Ryan, like compared to the best pitcher on staffs, yeah, he's probably good, and maybe even in the upper half of that.
And so,
then you go down the road through the 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's like, well,
there's a lot of question marks.
Yeah, maybe.
And yes, is the rotation still a strength relative to the team? Absolutely. Right. I mean, honestly, they could lose another starter and the rotation would still be a strength, but that has more to do with the weakness of the other areas.
Yeah.
But that doesn't do you any good. The rotation being the strength relative to the bullpen and the lineup of the same team isn't that meaningful. What's meaningful is the rotation a strength relative to the other 29 teams, or at least the other 14 teams in the American League? And I don't know that I would really make that argument anymore. Now, it's possible if several of those guys emerge as quality starters, then and then maybe 2027 looks a lot different. So that's kind of, unfortunately, where the shift has been here, at least in my mind, being here a week now, of like, I felt like I got to camp and our discussions in the latter half of the offseason were all about, is there a way that this team can kind of scratch its claw its way to 80 wins and maybe make things interesting and maybe make a little run at a wild card, or if the Central is down? I'm not saying I've given up on that, but this certainly takes a chunk out of whatever small chance there already was. If you thought that was a 25% chance, which I think is roughly what Baseball Prospectus or Fangraphs or whatever, well, certainly it's now 20% or 18% or something like that, minus Lopez. And so now I'm not as focused on that. I'm more like, how can you utilize the playing time and the development and the reps and the experience and everything of this season to hopefully, have a winning record and see if you can make things interesting in September. But like April of 2021, the biggest difference you can make is, now we know Zebby Matthews is a solid starting pitcher. Where we don't know that now. We don't know if David Festa can make it through healthy. Bradley, all this stuff. So it's not a positive thing by any means, but it does shift the mindset towards what would qualify, I guess, as a positive thing out of this season. And, the reality is, if you thought the Twins could outperform expectations, you probably still think they can do that because, Pablo Lopez, as good as he is, baseball, one guy can only make so much.
And the area that got hit by this is the area where they are certainly the most loaded to be able to have something special happen, right? And that's one of the areas that they can do that. I will say this from that. Whereas before I was sort of like, okay, for this team to be competitive, they need to put together an average bullpen. And by the way, we should probably talk. We didn't talk about this, but we should probably talk about all the different bullpen additions they made since we went and did this 2 weeks ago, right? Because the bullpen looks a totally different story than it was a week ago, let alone 2 weeks ago. But before, the focus would be sort of like, okay, they need to pull together a bullpen that's adequate. Right, and then we need the offense, 4 or 5 offensive players in particular, to step up to the point where you can get the offense to above average, and then you just rely on the starting rotation. Right. And now I've got those 2 things that I just mentioned, and I either need a little bit better than that from the offense than what I thought, or I need to have the starting rotation get back up to where I thought it was going to be. I need one of those 4 guys to really step into things.
It depends if you already viewed the notion of an average-ish bullpen as sort of wildly optimistic, in which case now it just needs to be wildly.
But an adequate bullpen it can happen. Like, that is the sort of thing that happens out of weird stuff sometimes.
Yeah. We can get into that further, but let's talk about our first couple of sponsors here. One, of course, is our presenting sponsor, which is Blackstack. Yeah. And if you are in the Twin Cities still and you're not here sweating your butt off in Fort Myers, go to Blackstack.
Yeah, that's all right. Blackstack Brewing. Listen, they are known nationally for their beer, and certainly they're known locally because they're one of the better beer brewers in terms of like somebody who likes beer in the Twin Cities. But they're also recognized nationally. We found that out just visiting them, and they were talking like, you ever go to Vegas, we recommend you stop by this brew because they're the ones we see in the national competition, and only the best of the best get invited to those national competitions. And I mean, we've known that for a while, how good their beer is. You can find their flagship stuff at any liquor store, and that includes the local 755 New England IPA. If you like IPAs, that's a gimme. Slopes Pilsner, also a gimme. They got Pull Tabs Pale Ale, Uncut Jams, their Strawberry Rhubarb Sour, etc. They also have weekly, like, if you ever see some other IPA that you've never heard of that has Black Stack Brewing on it at your local liquor store, just grab it, because you're going to like it. They release one of those maybe every week or every other week.
If you go to their brewery,
yes,
you just mention to them, hey, Gleeman and the Geek, little code word for you.
That's right.
$2 off a 4-pack.
That's right.
For you to take home.
That's right. So Black Stack Brewing, and their brewery is right at 94 and 280. Huge place, big 190 big screen. I think we're going to be doing a Twiz Daily opening day watch party there for. So
we just recorded a podcast with Phil a month ago. There, it was great. Phil Miller of the
So ask for them at your local liquor store, because they're now everywhere, or enjoy a beer on tap and take a 4-pack home with you. Mention the code word Gleeman and the Geek for $2 off that 4-pack at their tap room. Also,
second sponsor is Harry's Razors. Now, Harry's Razors has been a long-time sponsor of ours.
Yes.
This might be the first time that both of the gentlemen you are listening to have a beard for which Harry's Razors could be relevant. John has now been growing out this thing he calls a beard for approximately 8 months, and it looks like when I shave in the morning then it's 5 o'clock, that's my shadow.
And yet I feel more able to talk about Harry's Razors than ever before, because now I am shaving more than ever before, because I got to shave sort of my lower half of my neck.
Welcome to the neck beard club, buddy.
And then also, I now have to shave my head almost every day. And I will tell you how much I appreciate the Harry's Razors there.
And when you come to your senses, or more likely your lovely wife forces you to come to your senses and shave this monstrosity off, you will be using Harry's Razors to get a nice clean shave.
And I might just be using the Harry's Plus trial set, which you guys can get very cheap. Listen, we love Harry's Razors, and we love them because they are super affordable, like half the price of the normal set of razors. Super convenient. You don't have to go to the store. They just get shipped to you. It's very easy. Nice packaging. It's got everything together. It just makes buying razors easier. And for a limited, and now they've got this Harry's Plus trial set, which has a definitely different weighted handle, and I think it kind of changes the angle at which you shave. It's fantastic.
So you can get all this, $10 to get the Plus trial set. You go to Harry's, Harrys, harrys.com/Gleeman. What you get is you get the all new Harry's Plus razor that you just mentioned. You get the 5-blade cartridge. You get foaming gel with it, and then a nice kind of travel cover or case to protect all that stuff. And then you can just feel really fancy when you're just shaving your neck beard or whatever. And I know a lot of you listening to this look like me, and you got neck beards. So let's face the reality of that.
So just head to harrys.com/Gleeman to claim this offer. And after you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them, and please support our show and tell them that Gleeman and the Geek sent you.
Okay, so we'll get into the bullpen stuff in a second, but just a couple more things about Lopez. What's interesting is, like I said, we talked to Tom Pohlad in a little group session, like literally 2 hours before Pablo got injured.
Yes.
And was it Dan that mentioned the over-under to him? Somebody.
It
wasn't me.
It was Dan.
He said something like, what do you think about, Vegas got you at 73.5 for an over-under? And Tom Pohlad said, that's ridiculous. That was his quote. And, it's not like an owner's going to say, yeah, I agree with that. But I looked because I was, half expecting, let's say MGM or whatever you want to look at.
To go down to 71.5?
Yeah, but it hasn't moved yet with the Lopez thing, which tells me either they just haven't updated it, or it was already kind of factoring in the likelihood that Lopez would be traded at the deadline. Of like,
maybe
they're not expecting much from the Twins, and it's also just hard to go much lower than 73.5 for a team that still does have a handful of good veteran players and it is at least nominally attempting to win games, whereas most of so that's the third worst total in the American
League. It also might be, usually, the way that line moves is based on how much money is on one side versus how much money is on the other side. It just might be that the money hasn't quite jumped in yet on the under to kind of pull it down a little bit.
Yeah.
We'll see.
It's like I said, it's the third worst total in the American League. It's hard to go a whole lot lower than that. I think I looked the Pacoda, which is Baseball Prospectus, and Zips, which is Fangraphs. Those two projection systems weren't all that high on the Twins to begin with. They were projecting him for a losing record even before the injury, but after the injury, those both dropped by more than a full win
Okay.
to the like 78 and change range, 78 and a half range, basically, which is, again, I think 11th in the American League, something like that. You know, it also, here's another thing. You add the Lopez salary, which I know a lot of people have asked about insurance. Do the Twins have that insured? Mm-hmm. I asked around on that, and I was told basically, no, it's not insured. There are two reasons why it wouldn't be insured. One is the contract itself wasn't that huge to begin with. It was like a $60-something million extension for Lopez. He's making $21.5 million this year, $21.5 million last year. That, you know, for you and me, that's a lot of money.
Sure.
For a baseball contract to need to be insured, typically you're talking $100 million plus at minimum. That would motivate teams. But the other thing that I've heard from several people, and even someone outside the Twins organization, and I remember this was a topic at the time of the Correa deal because they tried to get that insured. The premiums on these sports contracts being insured, and specifically baseball, have gone up. There's a very...
You don't hear it as much about insurance in general because of this. Right.
There's a very limited number of places, and by limited I mean like 2 or 3 places, that you can even go to if you're a team to insure a $200 million contract. And because of that, and because of, you know, whatever the math and the premiums on it, the cost associated with insuring a contract has gotten so sort of lopsided compared to the benefit of it, that there are teams that just decide we're not going to insure it because it's not worth paying, you know, $30 million in premiums to potentially insure $100 and something million deal. And so I think that played a part of it. Also,
it turns out the insurance companies don't love losing money.
Right.
Yeah, and
they're good at making money.
It does feel like there was a moment in time where the insurance companies hadn't quite figured out what the real likelihood of this was.
Right.
And that's when we heard a lot about insurance. Like I remember talking a lot about insurance 15 and 20 years ago.
Right.
I don't remember talking a lot about insurance in the last 5-10 years for professional athletes. And because at some point the insurance companies were like, we are sure paying a lot of money out on these insurance things. We should probably charge a lot more.
More likely it was, we're making a profit, but not nearly a big enough profit, knowing insurance companies.
That's fair.
So I will say that, just to correct one thing I've seen people asking about, there's a lot of, I think, misconceptions about, even if you are able to get a contract such as this or a bigger contract insured, how and why it pays out. At minimum, the sort of most team-friendly version of insured contracts is a player has to miss 90 consecutive days during the season with an injury.
Okay, right.
And so even in the case of like Buxton in years past, where he's missed half the season, it's rarely been 3 consecutive months fully.
Right.
And so, you know, if a guy misses a month, let's say he misses 30 games in a row, but then he comes back, it's not as if you can say, okay, well, this guy's salary was $25 million and he missed a fifth of the season, give us $5 million back.
Right.
It's all or nothing, basically. Now, in Lopez's case, he is missing a clean full season. So he would be eligible for insurance. And I think the reason I've seen so many people asking about it, because it's like, well, are the Pohlads getting that $21.5 million back? And if they are they sort of more compelled, let's say, to give that to Lucas Giolito or Max Scherzer or something? It is my understanding that it was not insured. Now, they still have the ability to spend a little bit of money and bring those guys in. But I want to answer that. It's also true now that $32 million of the $105 million payroll are going to 2 players, Pablo Lopez and Carlos Correa, who will not play an inning for the Minnesota Twins this season. And so the actual team on the field is not going to have a payroll unless they make additions here of over like $70 million, which is Marlins territory. I mean, that is bottom of the barrel. Now, there are other teams who are paying down contracts or paying injured players, obviously. But just in terms of, hey, what's this team actually getting paid that we're watching, let's say, on opening day? About $70 million. So again, that maybe plays a part in your...
Yeah, Marlins might still be paying Stanton for all that.
Right. And, you know, everybody's got injured pitchers that are making money and all that. So on the bullpen side, you know, like you said, they've continued to add left-handed veteran relievers. Andrew Chafin being the most recent one on a minor league deal. Before that, they made a minor trade for Anthony Banda from the Dodgers, who had been designated for assignment. A little before that, they signed old friend Taylor Rogers to a $2 million deal. They also have holdover Cody Funderburk, who for much of the offseason was really the only lefty on the depth chart for the bullpen. And now they're at a point where it's interesting because theoretically, if I just say to you, who are the 8 best relievers the Twins have in camp? I would say that all 4 of those lefties would be in that group.
Yeah.
But from and that is in part because they've done so little to add quality right-handed relievers.
Yeah.
They brought in Liam Hendricks on a minor league deal as sort of a rehab project. They made a very minor trade early in the offseason for Eric Orzi from the Tampa Bay Rays, who's kind of a AAA guy with a little success. And then they have Cole Sands and Justin Topa. We kept waiting for them, even after they signed Taylor Rogers as a lefty, to sign a comparable righty or 2. And they just never did that. And then they just kept adding lefties. Now, I get it to some extent of like Banda is a better reliever, let's say, than a comparable righty that you could have got at a $1.6 million plus some trade capital price point. And, Chafin's on a minor league deal. There's no risk. If you don't like how he looks in camp, it's non-guaranteed. If you do, I think he makes $2 million. Hendricks makes $2 million if he makes the team the same way. But there is a diminishing return at some point. And what I mean by that is there's only so many matchups where you can
lefty heavy.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And it's not so much that you can't have 4 lefties in a bullpen, in an 8-person bullpen, have it literally be half lefties. It's not ideal. It's that you can't have 4 lefties of this modest caliber in a bullpen. Because if you have 4 lefties and one of them is, prime Aroldis Chapman and the other one is even, let's say, prime Taylor Rogers, that can work because you can use those guys as setup men and closers because you can deploy them almost regardless of the matchup. But unfortunately, this 35-year-old version of Taylor Rogers and this 35-year-old version of Chafin and Banda in general and Funderburk, who's the more unproven of the group, none of them over the last 2 or 3 years have shown a real ability to consistently shut down or even kind of neutralize in any way right-handed hitters. And that's common for non-elite left-handed relievers. Right. But the problem is if you have 4 of them, it's very hard to build half of the bullpen around lefties for whom you're going to try to shield against righties because you can't shield all 4 of them.
Yeah. Your initial question, which was, who
can remember back that far?
Looking at the, if you had to pick 8 guys based on quality, 4 of them would probably be left-handers. I mean, that's true, but you have to understand that quality that you're perceiving from that left-handed pitcher, their overall numbers, includes the fact that they've always been shielded versus righties.
Right.
Like all 4, not as much maybe Rogers as the rest, but for the rest of them, all of them have, to some extent, been shielded versus right-handed pitchers. That doesn't mean that they're worthless versus right-handed pitchers.
It just means raw numbers are not a full representation of their quality because they've had favorable matchups.
Right. In general, they aren't coming in the 8th inning to face 3 right-handed batters. Like that's probably not happening. Or 4 right-handed batters.
And the more you sort of ask them to stretch themselves or to take on more traditional late inning high leverage roles, which are typically based on the inning and the score more so than the matchup, it will erode their overall quality. I mean, it's just the higher percentage of right-handed hitters that they are asked to get out, the worse their overall performance and the less reliable they will be. It's a little, in a weird way, sort of like saying, list me the 8 best hitters that the Twins have. You could do it. They're all going to be first basemen and corner outfielders. Right. But you can't play all those guys in the same lineup. Somebody's got to play center field.
Right.
Now, he happens to be one of their better guys. Somebody's got to play shortstop. Somebody's got to catch. Somebody's got to play third. And so it's like, 4 of their best 8 relievers are lefties, except they're not going to be 4 of their best 8 relievers if they're used in sort of a traditional late inning way. Now, it might also be true that even using them in unfavorable matchups, they're still among the better relievers because it's such an underwhelming group of righties. But that's the question I have. And I looked this up because, like I said, you can read in the morning an article about this. It just doesn't include John's thoughts. But at times I just rant down here.
Probably for the better.
Some people might say the opposite. But I looked it up. The last no Twins bullpen in team history, and that's 6 decades or more, has ever had 4 left-handed relievers make 40 or more appearances in a season. Yeah. And it's been over a decade since they even had 3 of those guys. The last time they had 3 lefties who were kind of used regularly in the same bullpen was 2015. It was Glenn Perkins as the closer.
Okay.
Brian Dunsing.
Was elite.
Yes. Brian Dunsing.
Pretty close to elite.
Yeah. And a guy named Aaron Thompson, who actually used to be my neighbor in a building I lived in Uptown at that point. And so it's been 10 years since they've even had 3. I also looked up what is the average team last year in Major League Baseball. How many lefty relievers got 40 or more appearances? And I should note, like, a full season is like 70 appearances usually. Yeah, so I'm saying at least half a season.
Right.
1.7 is the average of the 30 teams. And only 4 teams had 3 or more. Yeah. So this is really within the Twins' history, but also just where the league is in terms of league-wide trends. You just don't see 3, and you certainly do not see 4 kind of regular left-handed relievers in the mix for this thing. So can the Twins make that work? Maybe, but this is not the quality or the stuff that you would normally associate with making that work.
And of those 4, really the only one that you can bounce back and forth is Funderburg. Right, like if you do want to, if you want to do like 3, and then kind of swap somebody in and out towards the back end, something like that. Yes. The other 3 guys are not going to be able to be optioned down to
Rogers and Banda. Rogers $2 million, Banda $1.625 million have guaranteed contracts.
Okay, but can Banda have options?
No, I don't think so. He's 32 years old.
I'd be surprised.
Now you can send. This is the last year in which you can send Funderburg up and down to the minors, and I do think that he's probably the person most at risk here by the Chafin addition.
Sure,
because the moment you add Chafin as a potential 3rd veteran. But here's the other thing, and this kind of is similar to the discussion we just had about kind of the Zach Littell or Zebby Matthews for the rotation. Do I really think that a 35-year-old Andrew Chafin is going to help this team be competitive so much more than Cody Funderburg that I'm willing to not find out if you have something for this year and next year in Cody Funderburg? And I'm not the biggest Cody Funderburg believer, and I don't even know that the Twins are the biggest Cody Funderburg believers. And he's also like 27 or 28. He's not that young. But he did pitch pretty damn well in August and September, which was a stretch where no one else in that bullpen really pitched well. He was certainly the standout guy in that bullpen. And so I would almost lean towards, let's give him, again, that extended runway to show or not.
Maybe they do. One of the things we're going to find out here in spring training is who's got some gas left in the tank amongst a bunch of these guys that they have picked up. Chafin is one of the ones that I am concerned about. The other one is the right-handed reliever they picked up. We also got picked up here. Like of the 8 people that we're talking about, I'm pretty sure Hendricks makes that 8 as well. And he's somebody that I think we're going to have a pretty good idea through 2 weeks of spring training if he's the guy. If he's recovered from the various surgeries he had and the arm, the elbow.
He really hasn't been healthy and effective for 3 years now.
Right.
He's also, I think, 36 or 37. Now, he was once a truly great reliever.
Right.
3-time All-Star. He had about a 6 or 7 year run for a couple of teams, not the Twins, unfortunately. He had left the Twins at that. It was a great moment. We were kind of getting to know Liam Hendricks a few days ago in the clubhouse, and he's quite a character. So is Chafin, but in a different way. He's very chatty. And Hendricks said something like, "Oh, yeah, I'm a maniac on the mound when I have a save opportunity." And I've seen that. People have seen that in the All-Star games. And I said something like, "Were you always like that? Like, I don't really remember you being like that when you were with the Twins the first time around," which was over a decade ago, obviously, almost 15 years ago. And he said, I'm not going to do the Australian accent, but he said, "Nah, mate, I was a horse S starter."
Well, that's a repeat because when we first interviewed him, when he first got at camp, you were doing it. I asked him about, transitioning from a starter to a middle reliever to an all-star closer, because we've got a number of that might be happening to some of our starting pitching here in camp and so on, and about what that transition was like. He says, I was a horse S starter.
That's his line,
to a kind of crappy reliever to suddenly, had a pretty good couple year run.
Yeah, and I mean, he
is that guy. He could not be more Australian.
Yeah, you say that as
he is a bloke. And
your brother's been in Australia for
in a good way.
How long has your brother been in Australia?
30 years.
Yeah, 30.
Yeah, so that's right.
Yeah. Do you think your brother has picked up a trace of the accent?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
He is when he's there, and he.
Right.
When he comes back, he kind of loses it.
He's like when Madonna married Guy Ritchie, and suddenly she had this thick British accent. Anyway,
I've had people talk about his kids because his kids have sort of a hybrid American / Australian
because their
accent.
Parents are American, but
that's interesting. His mom is their mom is Australian and their dad is American. Right?
That's interesting. So my thought on Hendricks is he's going to be to me, a more binary decision.
Yeah,
what I mean by that
agree with you, 100%.
is either he's going to be throwing 95 plus and look healthy and feel good, in which case he is all but assured of not only, in my opinion, being one of the 8 relievers, but I won't be surprised if he has a decent camp and looks pretty healthy. I think he'll be the closer.
I agree.
At the very least, maybe him and Roger splitting closing or something like that, a tandem, and who knows how many save opportunities this team's going to have.
Right.
Meanwhile, if he's throwing 92 and he has more arm problems or he just looks cooked, which does happen at 37, especially he's struggled the last 3 years to stay healthy, then I think it's just like, well, we're just not going to go forward with him. But I do think, I've watched 2 bullpen sessions he's thrown, one live and one on the side. The ball's popping in those mitts. I mean, he's throwing hard. And even last year, he didn't pitch that well for the Red Sox, but he averaged 95.5 still with the fastball. There's plenty of juice there. It's a matter of, can he sort of maintain it for 50 or 60 innings?
So you mentioned that we're watching the Gophers game tonight, and we got the first Grapefruit League game tomorrow. We are going to see the Twins at the Braves on Sunday. They got a split squad here on Tuesday. We're going to be seeing a lot of games, and the beautiful part about being able to watch these games here is we get access to StatCast data.
Right.
And I really want to start seeing what the velocity
in all
of some of these
parks
folks.
now. It used to not be in Boston.
It wasn't there in Boston at all.
It's all parks
and
now.
I don't think it was in the Braves one either. So that'll be great.
So then you can actually see what the real velocity is. You can start to see the RPMs and the other stuff. And I think
that's one of the things, especially when going back to the young starters, that I was sort of interested in is like, the Twins know more about what they see from those young starters right now than we do, because they're the ones they've got access to what they're actually throwing here in the bullpen sessions and in live BP and stuff like that, and we don't have any vision of that whatsoever. And the fact that they haven't immediately gone out and gotten somebody with that makes me think they want to see a little bit more too. Now, that also might just be they just haven't worked out a deal yet with Lucas Giolito or Zach Littell yet. Like they want multiple years or something. But
on the live BP front, which is the best glimpse we've got of the things you're describing of a Twins pitcher versus a Twins hitter. I know I've seen some funny posts on Twins Twitter where it's like Josh Bell rips a double off Joe Ryan, and somebody on Twins Twitter is like, oh man, Josh Bell looks good. Oh, does Joe Ryan look bad? Like, it's very hard.
Yes.
And we talked to Zebby Matthews about this yesterday. Was it yesterday? Yeah.
It was yesterday.
And he said, somebody said, like, what are your live BPs been like? And he's like, I feel good. Josh Bell got some good swings on balls against me, and he paused and he was like, which I guess I hope continues. Like, I hope he's good.
Yeah. But Josh Bell really hit the ball. And I hope he continues to do that, really.
Yeah.
Just not off me.
So that's just one of the aspects of early spring. So like you said, once the games start and it's real competition, and there are also guys, and it wouldn't surprise me if Liam Hendricks, given his personality, is one of these guys, you can only simulate real competition so much.
Yes,
like
that's right.
You need the bell to ring and it to be a real fight. And even spring training, when you're facing the Red Sox, is much, much different than when you're facing a guy who in the clubhouse is 6 lockers down from you and you want to succeed. So
you also get like pitchers who have been working on new pitches, and they're like, okay, it's breaking the way it's supposed to break most of the time, but until you actually get into some game situations, you don't know A, does that even matter? And B, okay, when those couple of times that it doesn't break quite as much as is it gonna kill me, or is it am I gonna give up a hit, or is it gonna give up a home run? Like, what does not breaking quite enough mean? So.
Okay, before we get into our next stuff, let's talk about our last couple of sponsors here. One is Hims.
Yes, Hims.
And it's too late for John Bonus. Okay, he's a cue ball.
And fortunately, I look devastatingly handsome with the cue ball, but not all of you are going to look as good as I do, completely bald.
Yeah, okay, I'll go along with that. In the name of the sponsor, yeah, sure. Devastatingly handsome is not necessarily the phrasing I would have used, but sure, that's 2 words that you can put together, yeah.
But if you are interested in sort of discreetly, especially, or just, again, lowering the obstacles of exploring getting better hair, we encourage you to go check out Hims. First of all, it's online. So you can go and you can not only find out your options, you can meet with a doctor, you can talk to the doctor, you can find out all the different kind of options they have, whether those options are oral medications or serums or sprays or chews, all that other stuff. You can grow your hair back in as little as 3 to 6 months. after you do that. And like I said, it's easy to meet with a doctor. They can get the expert care straight to you. There's no hidden fees. There's no surprise cost. And you can just think of it as a digital way of seeing a doctor and getting what you need to take care of your hair growth or other stuff that you might want to talk to them about.
For simple online access to personalized and affordable care for hair loss, but also ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/Gleeman. That's hims.com/Gleeman for your free online visit. HIMS, hims.com/Gleeman. Featured products include compound drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for full details, restrictions, and important safety information. Individual results may vary based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride. That's hims.com/Gleeman. Okay, so the other way that the rotation discussion that we just had and the bullpen discussion that we just had sort of blend together is the more guys like Chafin and Rogers and Banda and Hendricks that they've brought in, these sort of grizzled veteran contingent, the less likely they are to need to, like, be forced to convert one or more of these youngish starting pitchers to the bullpen, which is convenient now because you have created another opening in the rotation that one of those guys. Now, there's still some leeway because, you know, there are still kind of two excess guys, no matter how it shakes out. But the other thing is, they've typically, in years past, whether it's Randy Dobnik, Louis Varlin, at one point Bailey Ober even, they've liked to have a sixth starter that they really trust stashed at AAA.
Right. Yes.
Well, then, assuming you're going to have somebody there as the inevitable in-season injury replacement depth, then that really only needs one guy who doesn't make the big league rotation and then isn't your sort of number 6 guy that you could even toy around with the idea of putting him into the bullpen. And I wonder, because now you've gotten to a point where you're going to have, instead of 2 youngish unproven starters in the rotation, you're going to have 3, which opens up the possibility that you will need in-season depth from AAA, not just for injuries, which are inevitable, but for poor performance, which if you have 3 youngish starters, odds are maybe one's really good, one's mediocre, and one's really bad. You're going to be looking to maybe swap those guys out. So I wonder if they've reached a point, post Lopez injury especially, but also post bringing in all these 35-year-old relievers, where if they're no longer really that, I don't want to say open to it, but maybe focused on it as much as we assumed during the offseason, because we kind of had to connect those dots during the offseason because they hadn't brought in any relievers. Well, they all of a sudden, within the last 3 or 4 weeks, have brought in like 4 of them. Yes. Now, they might not all make the team, as we talked about with the glut or the logjam of lefties, but I wonder about that now. And we talked to Zebby about this. I asked him yesterday in the little scrum we did, because he had just offhandedly somebody had said, the Lopez injury, does that change your mindset? And he basically said, no, I hate to see him go down. We all know there was an opportunity, but there was already an opportunity to win a rotation spot. And I'm going to do whatever I can, but it's out of my control. And if needed, I'll go to AAA. I've been to St. Paul before and I'll be ready. So I said, well, okay, but there's another possibility, which you said Major League rotation, which you're shooting for. There's AAA, which, you cool your heels there and stay ready. What about the bullpen? And what he said was, that's not my mindset. They haven't really brought that up at all.
They haven't talked to him about
Now, I'm sure that's true, but it's also true that that's something that can occur pretty late in camp because it's a scaling down of workload as opposed to the flip side of scaling up in workload. In other words, if you keep everyone stretched out, everyone who's a current or a former starter at least stretched out, then if you have injuries, those guys can step right into the rotation. If you don't need them in the rotation, then it's very easy, and we've seen this with guys in the past, Varlin, let's say, to just go, all right, now you're a reliever, scale down to 1 inning. Yeah. Well, that doesn't really require that much physical work or time to scale. It's more of a reps and experience, whereas if you do the opposite and you have all these guys pitching 1 inning at a time throughout the 6 weeks of spring training, and then you get there and you go, oh, we actually need a starter. We need you back at 5 innings. Well, good luck. That takes a month to build back up. Yeah. So it doesn't surprise me that that's how they've sort of said it or not said it to Zebby Matthews.
But I think...
And probably Festa and probably McGable.
I think there are, perhaps they have approached that topic with, some players in there. What that made me, I'll say two things about that. The first is, I think that does is it frees them up to be sort of, we need to evaluate these guys as starter versus reliever based on whether we want them to be a starter or a reliever. They're not being pushed one way or the other anymore. There's no extra added incentive to bump David Festa to the relief role.
It's not a need-based decision. It's a performance-based decision.
Or just a decision based on that player.
Right.
On that player. Which is this player going to adapt to better? Where are they going to be better? And in that way, that's a good thing, right? I'll also just say that we've also got like a level of guys beneath these guys, because there have been so many of these guys we haven't had to talk about them, that we should probably just kind of start taking a look at, whether that is John Klein or Andrew Morris. You mentioned a couple of Marco Raya, who by the way is moving to the bullpen. We found that out.
Yep.
Connor Prelip, who is still preparing to be a starter, also left-handed. By the way,
Kendry Rojas, who was also left-handed.
Kendry Rojas also starter, and then there was one other one I was thinking of. Even Travis Adams to some extent, who I think is more probably geared towards the bullpen. I haven't talked to him yet as to whether or not, but he was kind of doing part of the starting stuff, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or piggybacking thing,
Yeah.
So
I'm curious. I mean, to me, that is probably the most intriguing. It was before Lopez's injury, and I think it's even more so now, of like the most intriguing storyline, not in terms of like what it means for the immediate roster, but what it means for like bigger picture, because they do need to figure out for the next, like, let's say 3 years, who the building block pieces of this rotation can be and will be.
Yeah.
Because, even if they do avoid another fire sale, Joe Ryan's not going to be here past 2027. Right, Pablo Lopez is highly unlikely to be here past 2027. Same as Bailey Ober. Not because they don't want to be, but because contractually they're free agents. And what are the odds of the Twins giving them some $100 million plus extension? I think pretty low. Well, it's a big difference of kind of doing that gradually, where this year maybe Zebby steps in and Abel steps in or Bradley steps in, versus showing up in 2027, like you said earlier, and we got a rehab in Pablo and 4 open spots. Well, then you're just kind of repeating the process of this year. And so you need to find out some of that stuff this year. And I do think it's funny because they have built up a lot of, if not good, like guaranteed high upside guys, all the names we've talked about, to the extent that someone like Andrew Morris, who's a good, solid pitching prospect, not a top 100 guy, not a future all-star, but a guy in a lot of organizations might be competing for the 5th spot in a rotation right now after doing some good work at AAA. Sure. And I think he probably is going to be a back-end starter in the majors for 5 years or something like that. But in this group, he's like 10th on the pecking order even after losing Lopez. And that's not a bad thing, but it's also eventually they're going to have to sort through those options.
Yes, that's what I'm getting.
What's a little bit scary is
sort through those options, figure out which one's going to be in the reliever, which one's going to be moved to the pen.
Which one's going to be a starter, which one's going to be a reliever, which one could be potential trade bait.
Right.
At some point, which one might you just not be interested in keeping at all? And that brings in a lot of self-scouting. Yeah, and that has not necessarily always been a strength of the Twins. I mean, there is a lot of room. People always focus on like trades, like, oh my God, I can't believe they traded 3 prospects for Jorge Lopez and he turned into a pumpkin immediately. Right. Well, that's pretty bad scouting with Jorge Lopez, particularly given some of the off-field issues that they were either unaware of at the time or just willing to overlook at the time that reared their head and made that an untenable situation. But then there's also, so those are kind of traditional, like, bad trade. They gave up value. They got a guy who wasn't good. Sam Dyson trade is an example. But then there's also self-scouting where it's like, if you're going to trade a youngish starting pitcher, it can be, which guy can we get the most value for from other teams? But it can also be, which guy do we have the least confidence in?
Right.
And that can go just as haywire. Yeah. Let's say you choose to trade away Andrew Morris because you have a lot of faith in Mick Abel. Well, if Mick Abel turns out to be bad and Andrew Morris turns out to be good, well, that is a self-inflicted wound at that point.
Right.
Like that.
Yep. I mean, you know more than the other teams do.
Theoretically. Now, that can hurt you, too, I suppose. Like, you have some
there's biases built in.
Right.
Sure.
And so that is, to me, part of what this season, and probably part of next season at least, too, is about, is like sorting through these guys that you've touted both as prospects, but then as trade deadline pickups, guys like Abel, Bradley, Kendry Rojas were added at the trade deadline in trades, and sorting through it and figuring out which guys can we build the rotation around, which guys we can't do that with, but we could move them to the bullpen, and all of a sudden they maybe can be late inning relievers.
Right.
And then which guys do we want to kind of maximize the cash in factor of trading them? And there's a lot of gap there between doing that well and doing that poorly. Sure. Yeah. And it really, if you do it well, you could be in a position where 2027, maybe 2028, you actually have a pretty good pitching staff. And if you do it poorly, you could be in a position where 2028, you're going, well, we've been bad now for 3 years and we don't even really have like the basis of a foundation here.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of this season.
And I mean, it's part of it is self-evaluation. Part of it is also development. You know, we've got to see if the four guys that we're talking about all develop, you know, are we worried that much about where Andrew Morris ends up? Probably not as much.
Well,
right?
That's the thing. Yes. If the guys at the top of that list, the highest upside guys, develop well, then it creates either as starters or relievers. Then it creates a situation where you go, well, maybe we can try to trade the 8th, 9th, and 10th guy to get help in the bullpen or get help in the lineup. Because the one thing I want to say, this is a very pitching heavy show, so we're not going to like try to do another.
But also that's because pitchers have been have been the focus so far up to this point in spring training camp.
But there are going to be opportunities to maybe, if things go well, trade some of that depth on the pitching side for depth on the hitting side. And one of the things that strikes me as we keep having these conversations now about rotation and bullpen, and the uncertainties there, and the number of jobs up for grabs, and the kind of moving parts like we just described. The lineup, and please do not take this as me saying the lineup is good, but the lineup is remarkably stable in my mind compared to the bullpen and the rotation. There aren't that many moving parts to be seen, barring injuries, obviously. What's going to be
not in the starting lineup.
Right. What's competitive from a lineup standpoint is the bench spots, the backup catcher, the backup shortstop, who's the backup outfield,
I would say
platoon roles.
10 through 14, or maybe even 9 through 14
right.
are the bigger.
But I mean, if you go around the horn, you know, Josh Bell and Luke Keeschel and Brooks Lee and Royce Lewis, and then in the outfield, Byron Buxton and Matt Wallner, and if they keep Larnach, those guys are not battling for jobs, and they're going to be playing a lot. It's the, you know, is it Kreidler or Arcia as the backup shortstop? Is Caratini your only backup catcher, or are you trying to find room for Alex Jackson also? Right. Like there, and you know, in the outfield, is it Austin Martin? Is it James Outman? Is it, you know, something? Those are interesting camp things. And that is kind of a traditional camp battle of like, oh, the 11th guy. It's not traditional to be like, there are 3 open rotation spots and we don't know what the bullpen's going to look like. Right. It's more, but it's just so much less interesting to be like, oh, the backup shortstop battle. When we're talking about who's going to be the 3rd through 5th starters, who's going to be the closer setup man. But that stuff does matter, but it does feel weird to be talking about such influx pitching situations and then go, well, we probably know 10 of the 13 position players that will be on the open, barring injuries, that will be on the open.
That's right.
And
the other 3 are the interesting part. Yeah, that's right.
Honestly, not only do we know probably 10 of the 13 position players, 8 or 9 of those guys, we know the role they're filling, and they're going to be playing pretty much regularly.
That's right.
It's weird because normally if I describe that, you go, well, it must be a hell of a lineup.
Right.
I have as much questions about this lineup as I do the rotation.
Sure.
And maybe that's wrong on my part.
Well,
but
no, I mean, Fangraphs does too.
True. They rank the lineup. Here's the crazy part, and even I'm pretty pessimistic about the lineup, did not see this. They rank the Twins lineup out of the 3, you know, offense, defense, special teams, the 3 phases of the game, lineup, bullpen, and rotation. The lineup projects the worst relative to the league as a whole, and I didn't think I would have thought that. I certainly would have thought the bullpen. In my head, pre-Lopez injury, I would have put the bullpen or the rotation somewhere in the 10 range, which they did. They had them 11th. Now they're 14th. I would have put the bullpen like 25th, and they were a little higher maybe than on the bullpen. And I probably would have put the lineup in like the 18 to 20 range. And instead, most of the projections I've seen have the lineup in the 20s, right? Lower than 20. That's a scary thought too. Although here's what I'll say about that, and it's a little bit like the discussion we had with the pitching. If those kind of handful of guys, Wallner, Larnach, Royce Lewis, Brooks Lee, who am I forgetting there? Kind of the 25 to 28-year-old range.
Wallner, Lee, Larnach, and
if those guys
Royce Lewis
don't step up here, collectively, I'm not saying every guy, but more than not, there is another wave very close.
Yes. Well, that's what I was going to say.
I've been looking at Walker Jenkins in person every day, and he sure looks like a major leaguer.
Yes.
I'm not saying hitting. I'm just saying walking by him in the clubhouse. And he, you know who's his locker mate? Kalen Culpepper.
Yes.
And they put him right by Byron Buxton, and that's for a reason.
And by the way, they moved him.
Yeah. And
the first day one, he was not there.
They got
the locker next to Byron Buxton was open on day one. And when they at some point between day one and before pitchers or before the hitters position players report, Kalen Culpepper moved into that.
Yeah,
locker.
which I love that. Obviously, I want to put everybody by Byron Buxton. I want my locker to be by Byron Buxton too, and then obviously Emmanuel Rodriguez is part of that mix too. I mean, I really do. I view this, especially post Lopez, as a transition year. I really think that's true, and that doesn't mean they have to lose 100 games. But I really view this as kind of a bridge to 2027. Now, the goal would be to have that bridge also be some fun and have that bridge also be competitive.
Right, yeah.
But the other goal is you got to figure out who is the core. And we've joked about this before. Everyone always wants to know what the core is. Some teams don't have a core.
Right.
Some teams have a bunch of younger guys who aren't going to be that good, and they're waiting for the next core. And that's what we have to determine.
Yes.
Does this team still have a core of that 25 to 30-year-old range?
The core that some version of the core we thought we had 2 years ago.
Yes.
Right.
Or are they just kind of placeholders?
Yes.
Is one of them going to be the kind of veteran who then is joined by the next hopeful core of Rodriguez, Jenkins, Culpepper, etc., Gabriel Gonzalez, let's say, whatever.
Because the core right now for this year, the veteran core for this year, is almost always it could potentially disappear at the trade deadline.
Yeah.
When Buxton was in camp on day one, and we talked to him about who the veteran core was, the names were Joe Ryan and Pablo Lopez and Byron Buxton and Ryan Jeffers and Bailey Ober. Well,
Lopez is out.
Well, all 5 of those guys could be traded at the trade deadline.
Yes, I will go further than that. Obviously, Lopez can't be traded.
Well, that's right.
I think it's more likely than not, with Buxton being maybe the exception because he does have a no-trade clause. Right. I think if they are not above 500 at the trade deadline, I think every single one of those guys will be traded. And if you play off of that...
Except for Lopez, right.
Right, who can't be traded. I mean, he's injured. He
That's
can
right.
actually be traded.
Yes, right. Yes.
I don't know why somebody would. And then, if that is the scenario that is playing out, I think Buxton will not want to block a trade. And I wouldn't blame him.
Yeah, I wouldn't, yeah.
I mean, he's sort of a little, slowly but surely, has been pushed to the kind of the breaking point of this. And he seems a little ornery about it. I say that as someone who's was ornery 45 minutes ago with John for a much less important thing. Because he's not going to be the last man standing. He's not. Who would want to be that? And so that is why I view this as a transition year. That's why the Lopez injury hurts so much, because it makes it that much less likely that the transition year itself can be sort of fun and enjoyable.
Yes.
But that is also why their lack of off-season moves, reinforcements, is so frustrating. Yep. Because by not doing that, and then by Tom Pohlad talking a big game about how he expects them to win and calling the over-under that was cited to him ridiculous, and that it doesn't match the reality of Andrew Chafin and Taylor Rogers and Liam Hendricks being your big bullpen additions. It doesn't match the reality of Josh Bell really being your only offensive addition other than a good backup catcher in Caratini. You're almost kind of you're kind of stacking the deck against yourself in a weird way and making it more and more likely that you will not have a good record by the trade deadline, in which case you'll go, well, we tried. Now we got to trade all these guys. Mm-hmm. Now, if you trade all those guys, what the hell does Byron Buxton want to be here for? And then you're in a full rebuild.
Yeah, that's right. Yep.
And so that's why, to me, you're trying to kind of thread that needle of avoiding that if possible. But if you can't avoid it, you at least want to have been in a position where you've made some headway so that it's not just, okay, well, we blew it up again at the deadline. We don't know anything about all these young starters.
None of those guys that we're hoping to step up really are going to be part of the next core. Now we're looking at a next core of, well, is Keishel developing? Is Walker Jenkins developing? Is Rodriguez roaming the outfield? Right. How does Kendry Rojas look? Or maybe we're hoping one of the starting pitchers come through. So
to finish up here, we mentioned the Tom Pohlad interview, which was on Monday morning. Dozen reporters or whatever. We went kind of quote by quote through that and had some, pretty juicy reactions
to
some of that. On the Patreon side, patreon.com/Gleeman. Like I said, 50% off. You can join us for spring training. It's $1 a week. Instead of $8 a month, we're making it $4 a month. Join us. Roll into the season. It's like group therapy.
Spring 2026. Easy to sign up, easy, $1 a week. And by the way, you'll see that code if you go to patreon.com/Gleeman at the top of the page.
Right. We've already had a bunch of people sign up. Down. Come join us. The couple things I wanted to note from that, though.
I don't want to ask you a question about. Don't let me forget.
No, go ahead.
No, when you're done. You go through that.
So we mentioned the Framber Valdez stuff, and I hesitate to get too far back into that because I know it frustrates people to, I don't feel we're doing this, but to give credit for, a failed attempt to add. Believe me, I'm of that mindset too.
Sure.
It's not, I would reject the idea that it's giving credit to discuss it or to take at face value Tom Pohlad saying they were in it. We can both tell you they were in discussions with Framber Valdez. Now, whether they had a 1% chance or a 21% chance of that happening is up for debate, and I tend to think it's lower. But at minimum, the fact that they even opened their eyes and made that call about that is intriguing for what it might mean.
Right.
Not what it might mean today with Framber Valdez.
There's no way they got into that discussion not thinking they were going to spend $20 million.
Right.
Right. And the fact that they potentially have the ability to spend $20 million is a significant development, regardless of whether or not they were truly competitive or Framber Valdez or not.
Right.
Because Framber Valdez got $38 million.
Right. So they weren't in the mix at 20 or even 28, but the fact that the possibility of spending that much put it this way. If they called him, his agent, and said, we'll give you a 3-year deal at $22 million a year, that's $66 million. Now he ended up signing a 3-year deal for $115 million that included an opt-out after each year. That is worth probably more than double $66 million. Not in terms of just pure money, but the opt-outs and all that. Now, if that's the case, and we're just throwing out numbers from the Twins side.
Absolutely.
I would argue they were nowhere near being in the mix for Framber Valdez, which is my assumption.
Right.
However, that means they were willing to give someone $22 million. If they'd have called and he'd said, I'll take it.
Right.
Well, that's something. Now, it also means, from Tom Pohlad's perspective, that he is willing to jump in the mix late in an off season, which is, by the way, how they got Josh Donaldson, how they got Carlos Correa. So that is a good thing to know, because that is the only significant moves Falvey made in his 9 years at the helm were sort of the, hey, the market's played out in a weird, unexpected way. Can we take advantage here? Now, in both those cases, it didn't work all that well. Right. So it is at least good to know that this Pohlad is saying he's willing to do that.
Well, and it also fits with a narrative, especially given the narrative that he's providing. And I think this was one of the things that we really made clear in that is that it might have been a very different offseason had he taken over the team in August and then taking it over in December. Because in December you've got the break and you're really not starting until January, and in January you're just learning the business and how baseball works, and now it's February, and now you're in February and you're like, okay, yeah, I understand the situation now. We gotta make some moves.
Right.
And the free agent market is done.
Right. I know there are a lot of people who hear the Valdez thing and they're like, well, I call BS because if they were willing to spend on Valdez, why don't they just spend that on someone else? But to your point, the October, November, and even during the winter meetings, which were early December, Derek Falvey, when he was still at the helm at that point, was asked about payroll repeatedly and just kept saying, I don't even know what the payroll is because I'm still trying to get word from ownership because that situation was in such flux. Now,
little game to get ownership.
Right. Well, little did we know it was in a lot more flux than even we figured at the time.
Right. Yes.
So then in mid-December, he's waiting for his marching orders and they never came. And so it was impossible to even dive in there. Well, then in mid-December, a shakeup. First of all, they bring in the minority partners, which had been expected, but then they just push out Joe Pohlad, and Tom Pohlad replaces him. And one of the first things Tom Pohlad said was, I'm no baseball expert. I'm a baseball fan. I've been around this team for my whole life. I like baseball. I know baseball more than the average person. I'm paraphrasing, but I've been running businesses that are unrelated to baseball for the last 20 years. It's going to take me some time to get up to speed. And even if it took him a month, which I think is a crash course pretty decent there.
Yes, right.
Well, then it's already mid-January at that point. And by mid-January, and I know this because I'm the one updating the top 50 free agent list on The Athletic every time a new guy signs, It was like Framber Valdez and a couple other guys. And then by the time February rolled around, it was basically Framber Valdez or bust.
Right.
And he being Tom Pohlad, definitely wants to get the message across that if he'd have taken over on, let's say, if Joe Pohlad would have been pushed out on October 1st, and the minority owners would have come in immediately, and Joe Pohlad would have been replaced by Tom Pohlad, even November 1st, for that matter, he wants everyone to know or to think things would have been much different. Now,
yes.
Does that mean they would have spent $20-something million on an impact free agent, maybe at a lesser level than Valdez, but a higher level than like Lucas Giolito or Zach Littell?
Hard to say.
Maybe. Does it also mean they maybe would have had the resources to actually pursue some higher-end relief pitching, which I was crying out for. Believe me, I'm still crying out for. Does it mean they would have have some more avenues to make an impactful trade if taking on money in trade? We'll never know. He clearly wants the message getting across to be, it would have been different if I take over. Now, that's very easy to say because you didn't take over in October and it isn't different so far. And it's one way to kind of kick the can down the road of aggressiveness and spending of like, well, I realize I'm not doing it now. I would have done it back in October and I don't really have the opportunity to do it now. That's true. There isn't really the opportunity to make a big splash now. But the fact that it is true now doesn't mean that it wouldn't have been true earlier as well.
But here's any more on that?
No.
Okay. Here's my question. I don't know. Maybe I asked you this question the other day when we were driving around all through Sanibel Island, etc.
You kept saying to me, "Is your refrigerator running?" That's what you kept saying to me as a question. Yeah, go ahead.
If on December 15th, instead of announcing the minority owners and that Tom Pohlad was taking over for his brother Joe Pohlad, but was still staying underneath the Pohlads, if they would say, "You know what happened? We got a surprise buyer, and here is the new owner of the Minnesota Twins, and it is Paul Tohmad." Right?
I like that. Okay.
We got Paul Tohmad now. Is it right? And he said, it's going to take me a while to figure this thing out, but I'm really excited. I'm the exact same speech. He says the exact same stuff. I'm aggressive.
But
I'm a go-for-it guy.
But it's not a Pohlad.
It's a Tohmad.
Tohmad, sorry.
Tohmad. Right? And he says, and then, he comes back at, he turns out Falvey ends up resigning. And a week after we hear that he tried to sign Framber Valdez and he comes to spruce up at spring training.
Everything plays out identically except the name of the person and the family of the person. Yeah.
How much more optimistic is the entire fan base about the future of the Minnesota Twins going forward?
Oh, I mean, wildly. But I will say
it's 180 degrees.
Yeah. But I will say you can't detach. Put it this way. We know too much about the Pohlads. And I'm leaving open the possibility, and I even had a discussion with the Twins official about this yesterday for 45 minutes, where they're basically saying to me, just have an open mind.
Yes.
We're not asking you to get rid of the criticism or even the skepticism, because you and I have both covered too many Pohlads for too many years to just say, oh, this will be different.
Right.
I need it proven to me.
Of course.
But what they said to me was, this Twins official, leave open the possibility that it is different. It needs to be proven, but don't, if there is proof that emerges here, if they do something that you otherwise, like you're describing with a non-Pohlad, would have been excited about or would have altered the way, don't just close off your mind to it.
Sure.
And I'm willing to do that. But I'm also saying back to them, and this is why it was a 45-minute discussion instead of a 5-minute discussion, if you can imagine. John knows a lot of my 45-minute discussions because he's on the other end of them a lot of the time.
That's it, yeah.
What I said back to them is, I do not expect me or John or any journalist doing their job in the press box, and there's a lot of good ones here, or any fan, to believe something before they see it. And that, unfortunately, because maybe only of the timing of the takeover and what was available to them to make a splash was pretty limited, it's been all words and no action so far.
Yes.
And, that is a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And I'm saying, I'm willing to believe there will be actions that match these words. I'm keeping an open mind for it. That is, I think, fair in this situation. But I will not assume that is going to happen.
Sure, of course.
I need to see it. And the reality is, Framber Valdez, December 15th, took him a while to get up to speed. What wasn't available, what isn't. Those are all reasons why the actions haven't matched the words. But they don't change the fact that the actions have not matched the words, nor do they change the fact that we're in, year 50 of Pohlad family ownership. Sure. And we've heard similar things before. Okay. The truth is, actually, this would be a good game to play, maybe. Did Joe Pohlad say this 3 years ago, or did Tom Pohlad say this 3 weeks ago? Similar quotes.
Or did Jim Pohlad say this in
30 years ago or 20 years ago? Right. Maybe we'll play that. And so that's where my mindset is on this. And I want to see the actions meet the words. And I'm willing to believe it will happen. And I'm also willing to believe that the options for them, the means for which they could have accomplished that in this compressed timeline were pretty limited. And, going out and spending $25 million, let's say, on Lucas Giolito, well, it may cause some fans to go, oh, okay. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, look, if a Twins PR person said to me, should we give $20 million to Lucas Giolito? What I would say is, well, we just spent an hour saying maybe rather give that job to in-house guys, but from your standpoint, go spend the $20 million on Lucas Giolito. Right. You're not going to make the team any worse, and you might convince some fans that that's a possibility.
If it's my $20 million, I might not, but you should go ahead and do it.
It ain't my money. I mean, yeah.
Well, and let me add on just one more layer onto what you said. If things go the way they should probably go, if this ends up at a 50th percentile outcome for this team, and it gets to the trade deadline, and we are 5 games below 500, and they need to make some decisions on whether or not they are going to start trading off some players and also trading away some salary. Yeah. If the brand new owner, Paul Tohmad,
you made it up. Don't look at me.
Paul Tohmad comes out there and says, "I do want to be aggressive. This is obviously not the time to be aggressive. This is the time to be aggressive on that." He's probably right. Right? I mean, he probably is right.
But also, can you afford to go another year, even though the circumstances dictate not being aggressive, and continue to tell people, insist to people, I want to be aggressive, I'm willing to sell. And by that point, it'll have been 18 months of nothing, and you've shed more salary. Yep. Well, then you, unfortunately...
and in fact, that question was asked of Tom Pohlad, right? What happens if the season goes poorly?
And he basically said, I don't want to talk about that.
I do not want to
I don't want to think about that. I don't want to talk about that. Now, we talk about that.
Why would I think about that? Is what he said.
So, yeah, it is weird. Like, I'm not saying he should have come in and not had guns blazing and not given his real thoughts. I appreciate that. I mean, Tom Pohlad has given more interviews in 2 months than Joe Pohlad gave in 2 years. And I appreciate that. Yep. And I do think his messaging has been improved.
And he has been active around here. He's been involved in such a rate.
We talked a lot about that on the Patreon side. He was chatting with Joe Ryan.
Making changes throughout the organization. Yes. Like there's a lot going on.
But to come in and say, hey, you guys don't know me that well, but I want to be aggressive. I'm willing to spend. Unfortunately, there just isn't, because it's so late in the offseason, there isn't that much room to do that. But then that lack of aggression and spending leads to what you just described, which is a bad first half, which then leads to a natural trade sell-off, which then leads to 2027 not being very good, and your payroll, by the way, being extremely low because you've traded away.
And because it makes no sense to really throw another $40 million at a team that's a 68-win team.
Right. Then you're on like year 3 suddenly, and your payroll's lower than ever. You haven't made any moves. The only way you can really avoid that, other than the team just overperforming in the first half this year, which is a possibility, is to get past the trade deadline this year, and maybe you do shed Joe Ryan and maybe Buxton and maybe all these guys we've talked about, and the payroll's $50 million, and there is no veteran core anymore, and now you're turning it over to the starters we talked about, Walker Jenkins, Kalen Culpepper.
Hoping they develop a new core.
What you could do is sort of put into motion the next phase of that, which might normally be 2 years later, of like, okay, now Walker Jenkins is pretty good. Now this guy's pretty good. We got a pretty good young base. Now can we bring in, the version of Carlos Correa,
Zach Wheeler,
right? Whatever it is, like good high profile veterans to put this into overdrive. Right. Well, the only way to really avoid then waiting 2.5, 3 years to do that, by which point everyone's called BS, rightly or wrongly, is to just do it in 2027 or 2028, and I'm
not sure that's even a good decision.
Yeah.
Right.
But So, okay. Let's see. I think there was one other thing.
Paul Tohmad, you've got a high.
I don't know why that struck me so funny.
High wire to walk here.
John's made me laugh like 4 times in 15 years just because I never really laugh that much. It's an unfair distribution of laughs on this show. It's not that I'm any funnier than John. It's that John is a significantly more audible laugher than me.
Fair.
But we caught up a little today. You got me good there. You hit me, Paul Tohmad. Is that what we're saying?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
I like that. I like to kind of print that out and put it on his office door and see if we can make that happen. Okay, so just a final word. We will be back with 2 Patreon episodes minimally before the next free show.
That's right.
And we would love to have you join us live from spring training.
Yes.
There's been plenty to talk about so far, and I expect once the game starts, we'll be breaking down a lot of that stuff too. Patreon.com/Gleeman, and if you sign up for a month now, you get it for 50% off. Yeah. And we'd love to have you join us for the rest of spring training. You get the immediate reactions to the Lopez news, deeper dives on the stuff like the Pohlad interview, all kinds of stuff. If you've made it this far into this show and you're still enjoying it, I can guarantee you will like the Patreon episodes even more because they are commercial free. Yeah. They are long form, deep dive.
A lot of times they're immediate reactions.
Yes. Yeah. Patreon.com/Gleeman.
Yeah, and plus we got a special guest coming up next week. We'll probably have a couple of games that we want to react to immediately. A weekend's worth of games that we're going to want to react to immediately.
We will make it worth your money. Yes. We have never really. We've heard a lot of complaints about this show. Aaron's too handsome. John's not funny enough. That sort of thing. Right. The one thing we've heard is we're not providing value for money. So join us, patreon.com/Gleeman. In the meantime, the people who provide the sponsorships to make this show free for you to listen to.
Yep, we appreciate
Black Stack, of course, at the front of the list. They're our presenting sponsor. They are big fans of the show, which I like even more.
And they are now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or to try something new. Join us at patreon.com/Gleeman for the week. Join us back here next Friday. We'll happy to talk about pitching heavy show this time. I'm guessing probably going to be a little more hitter friendly.
Or we're just going to make John do more spoonerisms that crack me up.
All right, bye-bye. And welcome to the end of this video. There's lots more. For another, just click on one of these boxes.
Or click on this circle in the middle to subscribe to all of our Twins Talk.
Thank you.
Cleveland.